The sky above planet Grey Rock was full of smoke, and fire ships flew fast through the air while red blasts chased them. One large ship called Stellar Ray was trying to land safely. It shook from side to side as enemy fire hit its back engines. The crew inside held tight to whatever they could. Sparks flew from the walls. A loud voice came through the speaker and shouted, "Brace for impact." Tommel was in the engine room when the blast hit. He was a human engineer with short black hair and strong hands. He had been fixing wires when the floor tilted hard. He fell and hit his head against a metal rail. Lights went out for a moment. When he opened his eyes again, everything was quiet, too quiet. Smoke filled the air. The sound of fire crackling came from the back wall. He pushed broken panels off his legs and looked around. The ship was half buried in a hill of gray rock and black sand. He could smell burned plastic. He could feel warm blood on his arm. Tommel got up slowly. He saw two other crew members nearby. One was moving and trying to stand. The other was not breathing. Tommel closed the eyes of the one who had passed. Then he helped the other one up and gave him some water. "We need to move," Tommel said. He looked outside the broken wall and saw more wreckage spread across the rocks. He climbed out and shouted to check if anyone else was alive. Some voices answered from far. He saw 5 survivors, walking toward a nearby cave. They were hurt and dirty, but alive. They waved to him and kept moving. Tommel turned to search the rest of the ship for others who might be trapped. He pushed his way through a dark hallway filled with smoke metal beams. Had fallen everywhere. He used a small flashlight to look under one of the panels. He found a broken robot and kept moving. Every corner he turned made him more tired. His breathing was heavy, but he did not stop. Then he heard a sound. It was not loud, but it was strange. It sounded like a soft cry or a whimper. It was coming from the last part of the wreck, a storage area that was mostly used for science. Gear Tommel followed the sound carefully. He stepped over a broken crate and moved a loose pipe. The whimper came again. It was coming from under a large metal sheet. He knelt down and looked inside a small gap. What he saw made him freeze. A small alien girl with white fur was hiding there. Her big green eyes looked right at him. She had long ears and thin arms. She was breathing fast and holding her side. She looked afraid, but not wild. She looked more like a child than a threat. Tommel dropped his flashlight and held out his hand. "I will not hurt you," he said in a calm voice. She did not understand his words, but she watched his eyes. She blinked slowly and moved a little closer. Her body shook like she was cold or scared. Tommel gently reached in and touched her arm. She let him pull her out. Her fur was soft but dirty. She had a deep cut on her leg. Tommel wrapped it with cloth from his bag. He gave her a small sip of clean water. She drank it slowly. He pointed to himself and said, "Tommel." She watched his lips and then touched her chest. "Nira," she said softly. Tommel smiled. He had never seen her kind before, but he knew she had been inside the ship when it crashed. That meant someone had brought her along, maybe for study, maybe for peace. But now, she was alone. Tommel looked at the sky. It was turning dark. Strange growls came from the hills around them. He picked up Nira and held her close. She did not fight. She leaned her head against his shoulder. The cave where the other survivors had gone was still far. Tommel knew he could not leave Nira behind. He looked once more at the wreck. There was nothing left for her there. No one else was coming back. So he walked step by step over sharp rocks and black sand. He kept his eyes on the path and one hand near his small laser pistol behind him. The ship continued to burn ahead of him. The wild land waited, and in his arms, the last survivor of another world held on tightly. Tommel walked carefully over the rocky path with Nira in his arms. The wind on planet Grey Rock was sharp and dry. Each step was hard because of the loose stones and broken metal from the crash. The smoke behind him was thick and black, but the cries from the sky were gone now. The enemy ships had passed for the moment. Nira held on tightly to Tomel's jacket. Her small claws were gentle but firm. Her breathing was slow but heavy. She was still weak from the crash. Tomel looked at her now and then, to check if she was still awake. She blinked once, and then rested her head on his chest again. The cave where the other survivors had gone was not close, but Tomel knew the direction. He had seen the signal from the emergency lights when he was climbing. Out of the wreck, he hoped the cave would be safe. He hoped someone had working gear to call for help as they moved along a ridge. Nira raised her head and looked around. She made a soft noise and pointed to the rocks on the left. Tomel stopped. He looked where she pointed but saw nothing at first. Then he noticed small lines in the dirt, thin trails like something had crawled through there recently. Tomel did not know if that was a good sign or a bad one, but Nira seemed calm. She made another soft sound and touched the trail. Then she nodded and pointed forward again. Tomel understood she knew the area better than him. They followed the trail slowly. Tomel held his pistol in one hand and kept Nira close with the other. He did not want to fire unless he had to. The wild land around them was quiet, but not empty. Shadows moved between the rocks. Small eyes watched them. From the dark cracks after some time, Tomel saw a fallen log from an old alien tree. It had strange blue bark and wide holes in the middle. Nira raised her hand again and gave a warning sound. Tomel stopped and crouched low. From inside the log, a sharp hiss came out. 2 green eyes appeared. Behind the wood, long snake-like creatures slithered out slowly. It had 3 jaws and thick gray scales. It opened its mouth wide to show long teeth. Tomel aimed his pistol but did not fire yet. The creature hissed again and then slid back into the log. Nira tapped his arm and gave a small nod. She seemed to say they could pass. Now Tomel trusted her. They moved around the log and kept walking. Soon the ground changed. The black sand turned to smooth stone. The air felt colder and thicker. The cave was near as they climbed a short slope. Nira made another soft cry. Tomel looked down and saw her eyes full of pain. He stopped under a wide, flat rock to rest for a moment. He laid her down gently and checked her leg again. The cloth was red with fresh blood. Tomel took out a small bottle of medical spray from his belt. It was made for human skin, but he had nothing else. He looked at Nira and showed her the bottle. She nodded slowly. He sprayed it on the cut. She winced, but stayed still. After a few seconds, her leg stopped bleeding. The wound was not gone, but it was better. Nira reached up and touched Tomel's face. She gave a weak smile. Tomel smiled back. They were from different worlds, but they were not strangers anymore. After resting for a short while, Tomel picked her up again and moved on. The cave was close. He could see a soft orange glow ahead. That glow came from heat lamps left by the survivors. He stepped through a narrow path between 2 large rocks. Then he saw them. 5 humans sat inside the cave. Some were talking. One was holding his side and breathing hard. Another was fixing a broken radio with shaking hands. When Tomel walked in, all eyes turned toward him. Then they saw the furry alien girl in his arms. One man stood up fast. His name was Bryn. He was a tall soldier with a hard face and short brown hair. He pointed at Nira and shouted, "What is that? Why did you bring her?" "Here." Tomel stood still. He looked around at the others, then he said, "She was in the wreck. She is hurt. She helped me avoid danger." Bryn stepped closer. "She could be a spy. She could be working with the ones who shot us down." Tomel shook his head. "She is a child. Look at her eyes. She was left behind just like us." An older woman stood from the corner. Her name was Mara. She was the team leader and had a deep, calm voice. She looked at Nira and then at Tomel. "Did she help you survive?" Mara asked. Tommel nodded. She showed me safe paths. She warned me about a snake. I would not have made it this far without her. Mara looked at Nira again. She saw the cut on her leg. She saw how tired she was. She walked closer and placed a blanket on the floor. Put her down here. Let her rest. We decide together. After that, Tommel placed Nira gently on the blanket. She curled up slowly and closed her eyes. Bryn still looked angry but said nothing more. Mara looked at Tommel and said, "You did the right thing. We do not leave anyone behind." The wind howled outside the cave, but inside it was warm and quiet. Tommel sat down beside Nira. He watched her sleep and thought about what would happen next. The wind outside the cave grew stronger. Dust flew across the land like smoke from a fire. The sky above planet Grey Rock was still dark from the crash and the battle. The ground rumbled softly now and then. Tommel stayed awake beside Nira while the others rested. Nira was still weak. Her wound was not getting worse, but she needed real care. She opened her eyes slowly and looked around the cave. She did not speak the human language, but her eyes were full of understanding. When she saw Tommel, she smiled faintly. She tried to sit, but winced in pain. Tommel gently helped her sit up. Mara walked over with a small light in her hand. She handed Tommel a tablet with a map of the area. "This is all we have," she said. "The main crash was here, and our emergency beacon is broken." She pointed to the top right corner of the screen. "There is an old signal tower on that ridge, but we need to move fast." Tommel looked at Nira and then at the map. "That ridge is through the wild zone," he said. Mara nodded. "No safe paths, no known trails. The last team that went there never came back." Bryn stood behind her with crossed arms. He looked at Nira again, but stayed quiet this time. Tommel turned to Nira and pointed at the screen. He showed her the map and the symbol for the tower. She tilted her head and moved her fingers across the screen. Then she pointed to a thin crack in the rocks drawn on the map. She touched her chest and then made a motion like walking. Tommel understood. She knew a way. "She can guide us," Tommel said. "She knows this land. She knew where the snake was and where the safe rocks were." Mara looked at Nira and gave a short nod. "Then we follow her." The group packed quickly. Tommel carried a small bag with food, water, and tools. Bryn took the pistol. Mara carried the medical kit. Tommel lifted Nira onto his back with care. She held onto his shoulders and pointed forward. The wild zone was not far, but it was known for danger. The rocks there shifted without warning. The air smelled strange, and creatures moved under the ground. They started walking in a long line. Nira would tap Tommel's shoulder to tell him when to turn. She would sometimes point to a plant or mark on a stone. She knew things they did. Not Tommel listened closely to her signs. After 1 hour of walking, they came to a narrow path between tall cliffs. It looked like a dead end, but Nira reached out and pressed her hand against the cliff wall. A small part of the rock moved. A hidden gap opened just wide enough for them to walk through. They stepped. Inside, it was cool and silent. They walked one by one through the narrow path. Sharp stones stuck out from both sides. Tommel kept Nira close so she would not get hurt. Suddenly, a loud cracking sound echoed behind them. Bryn turned around fast. A part of the cliff had broken off and blocked the way they came from. They were trapped on one side now. They had to go forward. Mara looked at Nira and gave her a nod. "Lead us through. We trust you." The path opened to a wide, flat area. It was full of black soil and strange blue plants. Small flying insects buzzed around. The ground was warm like it held fire under the surface. Nira pointed at a group of plants with red tops. She made a cross sign with her fingers. Tommel stopped walking. "She says, 'It is dangerous,'" he said. Bryn was ahead and did not listen. He stepped near one of the red-top plants. It hissed loudly and shot out a cloud of yellow gas. Bryn jumped back, coughing. His eyes turned red. Tommel pulled him away and gave him water. Nira handed Mara a small green leaf from her belt. Mara crushed it and rubbed it on Bryn's face. In seconds, his eyes cleared. Bryn looked at Nira with wide eyes. "You saved me," he said in a low voice. Nira smiled softly. The team moved around the red plants. This time, Bryn stayed close to Nira. Hours passed. The group was tired but kept walking. The ridge was now in sight, but dark shapes moved on the edge of the path ahead. They were not rocks. They were creatures. They had long legs and glowing eyes. Tommel placed Nira down behind a rock and stood in front of her. Bryn raised the pistol. Mara held a flare in one hand. The creatures moved slowly. Then one of them let out a loud cry. It was a warning to the others. Tommel acted fast. He grabbed a metal pipe from his bag and hit it against a rock. The loud sound echoed through the air. It confused the creatures for a moment. Mira lit the flare and threw it high. The red light scared the creatures. They backed away from the heat and glow. Bryn fired one shot in the air to scare them more. The creatures ran off into the dark cracks. The path was now clear. Tommel picked up Nira again. Her ears twitched as if she had heard something far away. She pointed ahead and made a soft sound. The tower was close now. They climbed the last hill as the sun started to rise. The ridge was wide and flat. A tall, metal pole stood in the middle. The signal tower Tommel placed Nira down. She touched the base of the tower and pulled open a small panel. She pointed at a red button inside. Tommel pressed it. A small green light turned on. The signal had been sent. They were not safe yet, but someone would hear them now. The green light on the signal tower kept blinking. Tommel checked the panel again to be sure the message was sent. It showed a small symbol that meant signal confirmed. Now all they had to do was wait. Mara sat on a flat stone and opened the supply bag. She passed out water and food to everyone. The group was tired and dirty. Their boots were full of dust. Their clothes had tears from the rocks and wild plants. Nira sat beside Tommel. She looked up at the sky. Her eyes followed the movement of the clouds. Her ears moved at every soft sound around them. She seemed calm, but Tommel knew she was listening for danger. Bryn stood at the edge of the ridge with the pistol in his hand. His eyes scanned the path behind them. He had not said much since. They reached the tower, but he stayed close to the group and watched over them. Suddenly, Nira's ears stood straight. She jumped to her feet and pointed at the sky. Tommel followed her hand and saw something small. A dark shape moved fast across the clouds. It was not a rescue ship. It was an enemy. Scout Tommel shouted, "Cover!" The group moved behind large rocks near the signal tower. Bryn raised the pistol and aimed at the sky. Mara took out a small mirror and used it to check the air from behind cover. The scout ship circled once. Then it dropped lower. It had not seen them yet. Nira crouched beside Tommel and pointed to the signal tower. She made a quick hand motion. Tommel understood. The blinking light was giving away their position. He ran to the tower and opened the panel. He pressed the button to turn off the blinking. The green light stopped, but it was too late. The scout ship turned fast and flew toward them. A loud siren came from its side. Bryn shouted, "Get ready!" They saw us. The ship flew low over the ridge and dropped 2 enemy soldiers. They wore dark armor and carried small rifles. They landed with hard thuds and started walking toward the rocks. Tommel picked up Nira and moved her behind the biggest boulder. He turned to Mara. "What do we do now?" Mara looked around quickly. "We hold the ridge. If we lose this spot, no one will find us." Bryn took cover behind a high rock. He waited for the right time to shoot. The enemy soldiers moved slowly. They did not know the humans were armed. As soon as one stepped closer, Bryn fired. The shot hit the soldier's arm and made him drop his weapon. The second soldier took cover and fired back. The laser hit the stone just above Tommel's. Head Mara through a smoke flare. The ridge filled with thick white fog. The enemy could not see them clearly now. Nira reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out a small crystal. She touched it, and it glowed faint blue. She placed it on the ground and pointed at the enemy. Tommel watched as the crystal sent out a low, humming sound. The ground near the enemy soldiers began to shake. Sharp spikes rose from the soil. The soldiers stepped back fast. One lost balance and fell. Bryn ran from his spot and kicked the rifle away from the fallen soldier. Then he turned and covered the group again. The second soldier shouted something in a strange voice. It sounded like a signal for help. Mara called out, "Take positions. They are calling more." Tommel placed Nira down again and gave her water. Her face looked tired, but she was not afraid. She took out another crystal and gave it to Tommel. He nodded and placed it in his tool bag, the sky above them. Darkened again. 3 more enemy ships flew over the clouds. Bryn shouted, "We cannot fight that many." Mara opened her radio. She tried to call for help again. "This is Mara on Grey Rock Ridge. Signal tower is active. Enemy present. Request immediate rescue." Static answered back. Then a voice replied, "Rescue ship on the way. Hold your position. Do not let the tower fall." Tommel looked at Nira. "We just need to buy time." The enemy ships dropped more soldiers near the lower rocks, but the humans held high ground. Bryn fired carefully. Mara helped a wounded soldier. From before, aim at the right angle, Tommel used tools to create a small trap near the edge. When one enemy stepped forward, the ground broke, and the soldier slipped. Nira used the last crystal to make a sound wall. It sent out sharp waves that blocked enemy signals. The ships above moved back slightly. They could not send clean messages anymore. Tommel gave her a thumbs up. Nira smiled back. Then the wind changed. A loud, deep sound came from the far sky. It was different from the enemy ships. Everyone looked up. A large rescue craft came down from the clouds. Its metal wings shined in the light. It was human. It was here. The enemy soldiers saw it too. They started to fall back. The rescue craft opened its side doors and fired warning blasts. The enemy ships turned and fled. Bryn dropped his weapon and laughed. "We made it!" Mara looked at Tommel and nodded. "Because of her." Tommel turned to Nira. She stood there with her fur full of dust. Her eyes looked at the ship. She did not move. Tommel reached out his hand. She looked at it for a moment, then placed her paw in his hand. They walked to the rescue ship together. A soldier inside helped them climb in. The doors closed. The ship rose high into the sky. Planet Grey Rock grew smaller below them. The signal tower stood still, but the message had been heard. They were going home. The rescue ship flew high above Planet Grey Rock. Inside the ship, the wounded humans sat against the walls. Their clothes were torn and their faces were tired, but their eyes were filled with hope. Tommel sat beside Nira. She leaned against him and rested her head on his arm. Her white fur was still dusty, but her eyes were calm. She was not shaking anymore. She felt safe now. Bryn stood near the window and looked down at the planet. He watched the dark clouds and the broken lands below. His voice was low but steady. "We should not have made it out, but we did." Mara sat across from them with a tablet in her hand. She checked the mission logs. She marked the rescue signal as successful. Then she looked up at Nira. "She saved us in the wild zone," Mara said. "She warned us. She led us. She gave us those crystals." Tommel nodded. "She is more than a survivor. She is brave." One of the ship's pilots walked in from the front. He wore a dark suit with a silver badge. "We are not returning to base yet," he said. "There is another signal from this region. It is close, we must check it. Mira stood. What kind of signal? A heat pulse mixed with smoke. It came from inside the eastern caves. The pilot replied, "Could be a survivor. Could be enemy tech. We cannot ignore it." Tommel looked at Nira. Her ears moved slightly. She raised her head and pointed to the front of the ship. She made a soft sound. Tommel understood. She knew the cave. "We will help," Tommel said. The ship turned and flew lower again. It passed over cliffs and dry rivers. The ground below glowed orange in some places. The heat came from deep cracks in the surface. Soon the ship reached the cave. Smoke came out from the mouth of the rocks. The pilot lowered the ramp and opened the side door. Bryn stepped out first with his pistol ready. Mara followed with the scanner. Tommel carried Nira again. Her eyes were wide, but not afraid. She looked around and gave a soft warning sound. The cave was wide inside. The walls were black with soot. The ground was dry but warm. Strange red crystals grew from the floor. Each one gave off a soft glow like fire. Mara's scanner beeped. There is something ahead. Heat signature strong but not clear. Bryn moved forward. He stepped. Carefully between the crystals, Tommel followed with Nira holding his shoulder. They reached a deep turn in the cave. Then they saw it. A small escape pod lay on its side. Its back was open and fire marks covered the shell. Inside was a creature. Not human. It had green scales and thin arms. It was alive but barely moving. Mara looked at the scanner again. "This is not one of ours. This is a survivor from the enemy side." Bryn raised his pistol. "Is it safe to help him?" Tommel looked at Nira. She walked slowly to the edge of the pod. She made a soft sound. The creature opened its eyes. It looked at her, then at the others. It did not try to run. It did not reach for any weapon. Tommel stepped forward and lowered his voice. "We are not here to fight. We came to check the signal." The creature nodded slowly. Its voice was weak. "Ship broken, I crashed. I sent heat beacon. No answer." Mara walked closer. "You were part of the attack fleet." The creature closed its eyes. "I did not fire. I only flew cargo. They left me behind." Nira placed her hand on its arm. She made another soft sound. The creature smiled weakly. Tommel turned to Mara. "He is like Nira. Left behind, forgotten." Mara was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "We take him." Bryn helped lift the creature onto a flat board. They carried him back to the ship. Nira walked beside them with calm steps. Inside the ship, the pilot checked his vitals. "He will live." The ship lifted again. It moved toward the rescue base now. Hours passed. Tommel cleaned Nira's wound and gave her warm food. She rested on a soft seat near the window. Bryn sat beside her and handed her a small metal badge. It had the rescue team mark for you. Bryn said, "You earned it." Nira held it close and smiled. Mara walked to the front of the ship. She opened the main channel to the base. "This is Mara, returning from Grey Rock mission. Completed. 1 alien survivor rescued. 1 enemy survivor found. Situation stable. Request medical team and safe zone for alien girl." The voice from the base replied quickly, "Received. We will prepare welcome home." Tommel looked outside. The stars were clear. The sky was wide. He looked at Nira. She was not just a passenger now. She was family. The rescue ship landed at the main human base on the edge of Sector 9. It was a strong station built on a high plateau with thick walls and tall towers. Many rescue teams worked there. Some returned with injured. Some went out for search missions. As the ship touched down, medical workers ran forward. They carried stretchers and supply bags. Mara stepped down first and gave a full report to the officers. Bryn helped the injured enemy survivor off the ship. He handed him over to the medical team without a word. Tommel walked down the ramp with Nira in his arms. She was awake and looked around with wonder. The base was full of light and sound. Big machines moved back and forth. Voices echoed across the stone floor. People stopped and stared when they saw her. Some whispered. Some stepped back. Tommel did not stop walking. He took her straight to the medical wing. A doctor scanned her wound and gave her clean bandages. They offered a soft bed in a quiet room. Nira looked at Tommel. She did not want to let go of his hand. Tommel stayed beside her. He sat in the chair and rested for the first time in days. He closed his eyes but did not sleep. He was thinking. Mira came into the room. She had a new tablet in her hand. She said, "The signal you sent from the ridge was strong, but not complete. There is still one tower on Grey Rock that has not answered since the attack." Tommel stood up. "Do we know what happened there?" Mira shook her head. "No one came back from that," sighed. The last message said the crew was alive, then silence. Tommel looked at Nira. She sat up and tilted her head. He walked over and showed her the map on the tablet. He pointed at the tower location. Nira stared at it. She touched the screen, then she pointed to herself. "She wants to go," Tommel said. Mira looked surprised. "She is not fully healed." Tommel looked at Nira. "She knows something. We should listen." Bryn walked into the room. He had heard everything he said. "I will go too. This time I trust her." The next morning they left in a small ground vehicle. It rolled over rocks and hills as the wind pushed against the glass. Tommel drove. Bryn checked the scanner. Nira sat between them with a small pack of tools and crystals. They reached the foot of a steep mountain. The tower was at the top. No signal came from it, but the structure was still standing. They left the vehicle and started climbing. The path was narrow and full of loose stones. Nira walked. Slowly, but with steady steps, she touched the rocks now and then. She seemed to feel something through them at one point. Bryn slipped. Nira caught his hand. Her grip was strong despite her size. They reached a wide ledge. The tower stood at the edge like a lonely guard. It was tall and silent. No lights, no sound. Tommel walked around the base. He found the main door half open. Inside, the room was dark. Panels were broken. Wires hung from the ceiling. They stepped inside with flashlights. Bryn checked the power unit. Tommel opened the signal panel. Nira walked to the back wall and stood very still. Then she touched a large round stone. Near the floor, she pressed it gently. A small door opened. Behind it was a hidden room. Tommel and Bryn stepped inside. There were two people inside, a man and a woman. They were weak, but alive. They had food packs and oxygen tanks, but no working radio. "Thought no one would come?" the man said. "Our signal unit failed. The door jammed. We could not call for help." Tommel helped the woman stand. Bryn passed them water. Nira gave them one of her glowing crystals. The man held it in his hands. "It is warm," he said. "It gives light." Tommel looked at Nira. "You saved them again." They repaired the main signal panel. Nira placed her crystal near the power source. It gave just enough energy to send a short message. Tommel pressed the button. The screen flashed green back at the base. Mira saw the signal. She smiled and ordered a rescue craft right away. As the sun began to set, the group sat near the tower. They watched the orange light cover the rocks. The wind was soft now. Bryn gave Nira a small snack from his pack. She took it and smiled. The rescued man looked at her. "She is not human, but she has more heart than many humans I have met." Tommel nodded. "She was left behind, but she never gave up." The sound of an engine came from the sky. The rescue craft appeared and dropped a line. The mission was over. The signal had been restored. The lost had been found. But something more had happened, too. Trust had been built, friendship had grown, And in that quiet moment on the ridge, they all knew one thing. This was not the end. This was the start of something new. The rescue craft hovered above the ridge where Tomel, Nira, Bryn, and the rescued crew waited. The sun was setting and painted the sky with orange and purple colors. The air smelled of smoke and dust from the battle. The ground was still warm from the footsteps and laser blasts. Tomel stood beside Nira. She held his hand tightly. Her eyes were wide and full of hope. She had come so far from the broken ship to this moment. Bryn checked his pistol one last time. Mara was on the radio. "Giving updates to the base, we hold position until the ship lands," she said. The enemy had not forgotten them. Dark shapes moved on the horizon. Ships with sharp wings and red lights flew low. Ready for another attack, Tomel looked at Nira K. Squeezed his hand. They were ready to fight if they had to. Suddenly, the enemy ship's charged laser fire filled the air. The humans fired back with pulse rifles and grenades. Bryn shouted commands and helped the wounded move behind rocks. Nira moved close to Tomel, her small paws clenched into fists. Then she reached into her pouch and pulled out a glowing crystal. She held it high and placed it on the ground. A soft blue light spread from the crystal. It created a shield that bent the enemy lasers away. Tomel and the others took cover behind the shield. The enemy soldiers tried to break through but could not. Mara gave the order to fire the flare guns. Bright red and yellow flares shot up and lit the sky. The enemy ships moved back, confused by the sudden lights. The rescue ship landed softly nearby. The ramp lowered and soldiers poured out. They wore heavy armor and carried strong weapons. They moved fast to surround the enemy. The enemy soldiers hesitated. They knew they were outnumbered now. The humans charged forward with loud shouts and steady aim. Bryn fought bravely, protecting Nira and Tomel. The enemy retreated. Their ships rose and fled into the clouds. The sky grew quiet again. The rescue team reached the group. Mara smiled and said, "You did well. You all survived because of each other." Tomel looked down at Nira. She looked tired but happy. She placed her small hand in his. The leader of the rescue team came forward. He looked at Nira with respect. "This little one is special. She saved many lives today." Tomel nodded. "We found her in the wreck. She was alone and scared, but she was strong." The rescue leader smiled. "We will make sure she is safe here with us." Nira looked up at Tomel and then at the soldiers. She knew she had found a new home. The stars appeared in the dark sky. Tomel and Nira stood together. The fire in the sky had passed, but the fire in their hearts was just beginning. They were not just survivors now. They were a team, a family, and the future was theirs to build.